There was nothing but pity in the look he gave her. "You aren't fooling anyone but yourself, Terry. My older brother used to be an addict before he got killed trying to stick up a store. I can remember as though it was yesterday the way he used to act when he got high. We used to sleep in the same bedroom, and I used to watch him cook up that stuff before he shot it." Billy slowed down for a light, then continued, "Every time he got high off it, he acted just like you're doing, nodding and scratching all over the place." His voice filled with scorn. "You tell Teddy, the first time I catch up with him, and I don't give a fuck where it's at, I'm gonna jump off on his ass and break one of his legs for putting you on that stuff." "You ain't none of my daddy," she answered with as much sassiness as possible. "And don't you go bothering Teddy just because you're bigger than he is. I don't know nothing about what you've been talking about, Billy Banks, and if you say something to my father, I'm just going to tell him you lied." She stared up at him, and then added, "I'm going to tell him that you hit on me and I wouldn't give you none." "Give me none?" Billy laughed coldly. "All I got to do is wait 6 months and then ride down on Brush or John R. and pick you up off the corner and spend $3 with you." "You just try waiting 6 months, Billy, and see what you get." She turned her back on him and said, "If that's all you can talk about, I don't think we have anything else to discuss." As they continued on in silence, she debated whether or not to have him drive up in front of Porky's house. She decided to have him drop her off 2 doors away. She reasoned that he wouldn't know the difference between Porky's or Joe Blow's. When they got to Porky Street, she saw Teddy parking in front of the dope house. She grabbed Billy's arm. "Don't you start nothing with Teddy. Please, Billy." She held his arm, waiting for an answer. She knew Billy's reputation as a fighter from their high school days. It wouldn't be anything strange for him to get out of the car and knock Teddy down. Billy glanced at her and saw the fear in her eyes. He had been in love with her ever since their early school days. They had ridden the same school bus, and he used to wait in the snow just for the chance to walk to their bus stop with her. When the other boys his age had started to date, he had been too busy working after school, selling papers, then later working in a supermarket. All the while he worked, he had kept one burning idea in mind: make a success of his life, and one day, she would be his. In the past half an hour, he had seen his daydream destroyed. Once he became aware of her use of drugs, he knew that there was no room in his life for her. He had watched one life ruined because of heroin, and he knew he could not stand to see another person close to him go the same way. The sight of Teddy, and the idea of his having made an addict out of her, was almost too much. He fought to control himself. He realized that, if he got out of the car now, he would lose everything he had worked for, all the nights he had spent in the factory, all the sleepless days in school. There was no doubt in his mind that if he got out of the car, he would end up killing Teddy. He smothered the black rage that consumed him. Billy reached across Terry and fumbled the door latch open. "Okay, Terry," he managed to say, fighting back the lump in his throat. "It's your play, honey. Just be sure to take care of yourself." She stepped from the car. "Okay, Billy. And thanks for the lift." "Terry," he called, her name bringing tears to his eyes. "Terry, if you ever need something, or someone, call me. Don't forget now. I'll come to you wherever you're at. Just call." She forced a smile. She wanted to leap back in the car and lay her head on his large shoulders and ask for help. She looked up and saw Teddy bearing down on them, so she quickly closed the car door. "Thanks, Billy," she called after him as he pulled away from the curb. Teddy glared angrily at Billy as he drove past. He grabbed Terry brutally by the arm and snatched her around. "What the fuck was you doing with that square-ass Billy?" She jerked her arm loose. "If you leave my car alone, I wouldn't have to bum rides." Before she knew what was happening, he slapped her upside the head. "Don't you talk to me in that tone of voice. You save all your smart-ass answers for your square-ass friend." Without thinking about it, she looked down the street to make sure Billy hadn't seen Teddy strike her. It wouldn't do at all for him to see that. If he had, she doubted she would have been able to stop him from whipping Teddy. Teddy slapped her again. "Bitch, don't be looking for that nigga. Ain't nothing he can do but get both of you killed out here in the street." Teddy glanced in the direction Billy had gone. For all of his threats, he didn't really want to see Billy coming back. After making sure Billy was nowhere in sight, he slapped her again, then wheeled on his heel and walked towards the dope house. Terry rubbed her palm over her cheek and followed docilely behind him. "Your days are numbered," she murmured softly under her breath. 6. The department store was just about empty. The doors had been closed for the last 20 minutes, and most of the salesgirls were getting rid of the slow shoppers. Terry glanced at her watch nervously. It was 10:15, so it wouldn't be too much longer before she could get away. For one of the few times she had loaned Teddy her car, she wasn't worried about him not picking her up. He had told her to steal something to sell, and she had taken 2 Kimberly knit dresses earlier in the evening and put them in her large pocketbook. It was the first time she had stolen something, and her nerves were acting up. After she got rid of her last customer, she rushed to her locker and slipped on her fall coat. She removed the purse and started towards the door. She hadn't stolen the garments because of Teddy's constant nagging. She had taken the dresses because she wanted to blow as soon as she got off work. Her anger was still aroused over Teddy slapping her earlier that evening, but for now, she knew there wasn't much she could do about it. "Good night, Mrs. Breeding," she called as she waved at her supervisor. Her legs trembled slightly, but she knew she had gone too far now. If she was busted, it would be before she left the store. She reached the door and began to breathe more easily. As soon as she stepped outside, she saw Teddy double parked, waiting for her. He blew the horn loudly as soon as he saw her come outside. Terry bit her lip in frustration. What in the world had she ever seen in him? He was loud. He cursed all the time. She wondered what it would have been like to have a man like Billy for a boyfriend. Terry ran between 2 parked cars and stopped. The front fender of her car had a large dent in it. She stared at it, surprised. Before she could move, Teddy's voice came to her. "Come on, goddammit, we ain't got all night!" He glared at her angrily from behind the steering wheel. The passenger door opened, and Snake, tall and dark, stepped out. For the first time, she noticed that he was not alone. The back seat held a couple of other dope fiends. They stared at her curiously. Terry hurried towards the car. She glanced over her shoulder to see if any of the other salesgirls had come out. The last thing in the world she wanted was for them to see the car full of men waiting for her. She blushed furiously and jumped in the car. Snake got back inside, squeezing her in the middle. She stared up at Teddy. "I see you finally got around to tearing the car up," she said, her words dripping with sarcasm. "Damn all that," Teddy replied arrogantly. "It ain't about that. I had an accident, as you can see, so that should cover that shit. What I want to know," he began, "is whether or not you took care of that business I told you to take care of." He pushed the gas pedal down to the floor, trying to catch a yellow light, and ended up running through a red one. 2 of the addicts in the back seat turned around to see if any police cars were behind them. "Take it easy, man," Snake said in his easy drawl. "We got that hot record player in the back seat." "Don't make me ask you again, bitch," Teddy said loudly, more for his friend's benefit than Terry's. "Did you swing with that stuff like I asked you?" Terry shook her head, afraid to take the chance on speaking. She was so angry that she knew if she opened her mouth, he wouldn't like what he heard. "Let me see what you got," he ordered loudly. "I got to make sure you ain't brought some of that cheap shit out." "What you thinking about, Teddy?" Snake asked lightly. "Terry probably knows more about expensive clothes now than you'll ever know. Ain't you forgetting, man, that she works with the stuff every day?" He rubbed his leg up against hers. If Teddy should end up blowing, he thought, he couldn't think of a better man to get Terry on the rebound than himself. The more he listened, the more sure he was of Teddy losing her. A man didn't treat a woman like Terry like a dog. Not if he wanted her. You had to baby them, keep them interested, and never go out of your way to embarrass them in front of anyone, even dope fiends. Teddy took the express and drove over to the west side. He was too busy driving to examine the dresses Terry pulled out of her purse. The other addicts in the car quickly gave him their opinion of the clothes. From their admiration, he knew that he could get good money off of them. He left the freeway at Grand River and turned right. He parked a block away from Linwood and climbed out of the car, taking the clothes with him. When Terry started to follow, he waved her back. "You wait in the car, baby. We'll be back shortly. The fence don't like too many new faces coming up." Snake pulled the record player out of the back. "You can wait too," he said to the other two addicts. "Bullshit," Red and Tiny Tim both said together. Both addicts climbed out and followed them down the street. For a brief moment, Terry was tempted to go. She was quite aware that Teddy was planning on playing on her for the dresses. She stayed in the car and sat staring out of the windshield with unseeing eyes. Her mind was too occupied with the problem of trying to figure out what she could tell her father about the car. If she told him Teddy had wrecked it, he would go through the ceiling. It would be better to just say that she left it parked, and when she came back, someone had backed into it. It wasn't long before Teddy and his group reappeared, arguing amongst themselves over the money. Teddy got in and started up the motor. "How much did you give for the outfits I gave you?" she asked curiously. "I had to accept 1/3 of the original price," he said quickly. "But since the man has some dope, I just took 1/4 of dope for my share." "You know I told you this afternoon, Teddy, that I would have to have some money because I had to pay the car note." She glared up at him.